Democrats are certainly fired up and mobilized. They're ready to really get to work, or not even get to work. They are working hard in order to win in November. But I can't tell you how many Republicans, how many people pull me aside. And it's always this variation of a very similar conversation where they say, hey, I can't say this publicly, or, I'm not going to post about this on social media, but, the guys running on the other side are really, really too out there, or all of this, craziness on the far right is just too much for me. I don't really believe in all of that MAGA stuff.
Alrighty, welcome back. It's Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person, and we are happy now to have with us our next Lieutenant Governor of the state of Alabama. The guy that's going to be a heartbeat away from Doug Jones or the other Democrats. A heartbeat away from becoming the next governor.
Thanks, Josh. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Sorry.
I know you did that for me. Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Listen, it's, but honestly, that's kind of, the way it looks right now. The polling is going very well, for a lot of folks, and for the Democrats in particular. I think it looks a lot brighter. I mean, however, I gotta say, Philip, I've been disappointed, man, because you haven't insulted anybody's religion. You haven't made your own fake ID. I mean, what the hell, man? How do you expect to be elected lieutenant governor of this state if you don't do something crazy, man?
I know I'm boring compared to the others. I'm talking about hospital closures and keeping hospitals open. I'm talking about keeping schools and, funds in public schools, talking about putting more money in people's pockets. I mean, boring stuff compared to all this other drama. But no, I mean, look, all jokes aside, I mean, it's so ridiculous. I mean, we have all these real issues. And people I don't need to tell you all and your listeners, people are hurting to pay their bills. People are worried about not having access to good health care. They're concerned about making sure that there are good public schools in their area. I mean, there's so many real things. And then there's all this foolishness on the other side. But look, I'll say this, let them continue to make fools of themselves. Let them continue to focus on nonsense. And, we're going to keep talking about the issues and keep listening to what people actually care about.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. How has it been out there so far? You made the pledge to travel around to all the counties, and I don't know where you are on that trek yet, right now, but what has the reception been like? What have you experienced in some of these places? Because you've gone into some places that they're not necessarily Democratic friendly, folks. What has the reception been like? How have you felt like the response has been?
Yeah, and I've been to about a third of the counties so far. And now that the legislative session is over, that'll free up even more time to hit even more counties each week. And look, Democrats are certainly fired up and mobilized. They're ready to really get to work, or not even get to work. They are working hard in order to win in November. But I can't tell you how many Republicans, how many people pull me aside. And it's always this variation of a very similar conversation where they say, hey, I can't say this publicly, or, I'm not going to post about this on social media, but, the guys running on the other side are really, really too out there, or all of this, craziness on the far right is just too much for me. I don't really believe in all of that MAGA stuff. And then what I say to them, I say, look, if you're not going to put out a yard sign or post about it or publicly say that, that's fine. But as long as when you go into the polling place and you're in the privacy of the voting booth, please, for the love of God, just be willing to cross over, be willing to consider reasonable Democrats. So those conversations, and it's not just me hearing that. I mean, Democrats running up and down the ballot we all are hearing that. And I certainly, look, it's a lot of work ahead. We know the state that we're in, but the fact that we're hearing those things on a daily basis from people all over the state, it shows that there really could be the opportunity to put together a strong coalition, certainly of Democrats. We have to get good Democratic turnout, but get over some crossover Republicans and independents.
Philip, I know you've got primary opposition here, but I have to say I never really hear anything about your opponent, and I think most of us would consider you the front runner. for the Democratic nomination. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that assume that you will indeed prevail in the Democratic primary. My first question is, and I'm not asking you to make an endorsement as it relates to who should be Alabama's next governor, but I am going to ask you, or would like to ask you, about the type of leader you'd like to see ultimately in the governor's mansion in November.
Sure. And look, I've shared this very publicly that former Senator Jones had strongly encouraged me and asked me to consider running on what he's calling the change ticket. So I'm certainly supporting and with him 100% and hope to see that he's the next governor. We do have good candidates running and we all cross paths a lot. But look, at the end of the day, I think Senator Jones with his experience, having gotten things done in the United States Senate, knowing what it takes to work across the aisle. But really, for any leader in our state, and certainly as governor, lieutenant governor, having someone that has a decency to them and I'm not talking about being a soft person, but talking about having compassion and empathy. I mean, I know that in this day and age, maybe those sound like things that do not belong or don't have a room in our politics, but really, people are hurting out there. People, I can't tell you, I mean, having been a public school teacher and continuing to work with students, how many young people continue to be affected by gun violence, how many families are hurting from that. So having leaders in there who are not just in there for the political sportsmanship and who are in there to score points, but people that actually in their hearts care about people and are in touch with those needs. So I would say that characteristic, is really important. But then someone also who knows how to get things done. It is easy to run for office and say that you're going to do all sorts of things and promise it. I always say, well, look at someone's track record. What have they done in their life? What have they done in their career? What have they done in their public service? Have they gotten bills passed? Have they secured funding for programs? Have they been able to, win lawsuits? So all of those kinds of things in their track record are so important. And then the last thing I would say is looking at consistency. People who do not just show up when it's election time, but have consistently been doing the work for years and years and decades, not people that just pop up when it's election time.
So based on what you've described, and you've already, conceded that you have a particular preference and affiliation. So you basically made an endorsement, which is fine. But based on what you've described, are you suggesting that you think if Will Boyd or if Chig Martin or Yolanda Flowers were to end up winning the primary, and I'm just mentioning those three because they seem to be the most prominent of the others who are vying for the Democratic nomination. Are you saying that you could not work with them, or what are you saying?
Look, with Miss Flowers, with Dr. Boyd, with Mr. Martin, we're constantly at events together. We often find, even just last night, I was at an event in Opelika, and Miss Flowers was there, and Mr. Martin was there. Dr. Boyd and I are often at events, and I have tremendous respect for all of them. I certainly could work with any of them. I share that to say that I've even gotten the question of, well, what if it is a Republican governor? I certainly hope not, and we're going to do everything we can for it to be a Democratic one. That would be really tough, but my attitude and approach to the legislature has been I'm going to stand firm and unequivocal on the issues that are important, and not at all compromise when it comes to my values and integrity. But where there is common ground on things like mental health care, on issues where we can work together, I'm always going to find that common ground and work well with most people. So whoever it is, I look forward to working with them, and certainly hope it's, I'm in the position that I can get to work with them.
What do you think right now? What are the issues that kind of cross lines? What are the things that you hear from people? Because we've all seen the numbers. We've seen the special elections in different states. We've seen even the Marjorie Taylor Greene district numbers where Republicans are not doing well. And so there has to be things that are driving those folks, the Republicans, to think differently, to seek different solutions. So what do you feel like those issues are in our state? What do you feel like can bring Republicans over and convince them finally to, hey, give up on this idea that every Republican is better than every Democrat?
Yeah, I think in general, pointing to the last 10 plus years of super majority Republican leadership and including having the governor's office and asking people, has your quality of life really improved? Have more
Yeah.
hospitals opened or have they closed? Do you have more money in your pocket to be able to help send your child to college or
Mm-hmm.
help to buy a new car or pay your utility bill. So that kind of broad framing of it, but then on a very individual, level, I mean the utility rate issue and the sense that, and not just on that issue, but on that there are big special interests that control much of Montgomery and that whatever they want is going to go. In general, people are I hear from Democrats and Republicans that they're just tired of that and they feel like that their voices aren't heard. They feel like that things are often set up and the deck is stacked against them. So I think in general, talking about that, having leaders that are going to listen to people and advocate for them and not just do what powerful, well-funded special interests are going to do. I think there's a lot of crossover and a lot of bipartisan support on that. And then, I know I've mentioned it a few times now, but healthcare and hospitals, it doesn't matter
Yeah.
who you are, where you live, people are concerned about that. So I think putting it all together, is certainly where there's then that support. And well, I keep saying one more, but one more I'll add into is like I hear from people, they look at some of the bills that come through the legislature. So, and the one I hear the most that just epitomizes some of the ridiculous aspect of things, but the bill to change the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America in state
Right.
documents. And, when you bring that up with people, yes, people that are hardcore MAGA, they're all for that. They think that's great. But a lot of others, they say, what are we doing? Like, why are we wasting our time and not talking about solutions, not talking about things that are going to help people? So when you put it all together and say, well, hey, there's all this other foolishness, the deck is stacked by powerful special interests, and your quality of life hasn't improved, things are not moving forward in the ways that they should. That's where it's transcends Democrat or Republican.
Yeah. Yeah. One other thing I wanted to ask you about that I think is definitely in your wheelhouse, given your history, is Montgomery. There has been a lot of talk, the threats of the National Guard and, just what basically a hellscape the city of Montgomery is now under the leadership of Stephen Reed. And I've pushed back on that. But you have a pretty unique perspective because you were a school teacher there. So you worked with some of these kids. You worked with, so if I'm not mistaken, I think I saw you post the other day that one of your former students was a victim of the gun violence and had died.
Hmm.
And so you know them, you know their families, you know the reality of kind of what's taking place there. What do you, when you've heard this, the more recent stuff about the rhetoric around Montgomery, what are your thoughts? And then also, what if you could get in and have anything happen that you would want to solve some of this, what do you feel like is needed in Montgomery?
Sure. And look, I'll preface it with that. Certainly having a well-funded, well-staffed, high morale police department is important in any city, but
Sure.
that is not the end all be all to reaching our young people, particularly into stopping gun violence. The young man, Jamichael, who was shot and killed a few weeks ago, amongst other shootings in Montgomery, but Jamichael was a student of mine back in 2012 when I taught at Lee, and police cannot have been there or prevented that shooting. What could prevent those kind of situations are things like having more conflict resolution programs and courses for our young people. I am glad that the state, and this didn't get a whole lot of attention, but we did pass a bill that was sponsored by Senator Smitherman up in Jefferson County that will require students to take a conflict resolution or peer mediation kind of class.
Hmm.
Is that going to stop every situation of gun violence? No, but can that make a big difference? Absolutely. So having things like that in our schools, having access to those kind of counselors that can help teach our young people how to deal with things in a nonviolent way. I say this all the time as well. I know it's not going to stop every act of gun violence, but doing away with permits. And I know a lot of Republicans, they hate that we keep bringing it up, but I cannot talk to a sheriff or police officer throughout the state without hearing that has made their job harder, and it has just turned Alabama, not just Montgomery, Alabama, into what I've heard described as the Wild West.
Right.
So if you have things like conflict resolution programs, you have things like
Mm-hmm.
a permit process. Um, You'll have the one of the strongest programs in Montgomery has been doing this for a few years now, and it takes time, and I think the more it's resourced, but having these violence interventionists, so people that are boots on the ground, so they may hear that, hey, uh, person A and person B are having a beef, and they're hearing that there's talk that someone may pick up a gun and deal with it that way without putting that interventionist life in danger. But you have a community member who's trusted and has that kind of street cred and respect, and they try to intervene. So having those kinds of programs, I mean, that those are all things that can help more. But on top of it, and Josh, I mean, you've certainly written a lot about this, but at the end of the day, it's about investing in our young people and investing in communities, and everything from public education to having good transportation, having good health care. I mean, if we really provide young people with a good quality of life, those are the things that are going to help the most in the long run. So
I
yes,
agree.
having police and having a good public safety measures, of course. And one of my I talk a lot about it in the campaign. I mean, everyone wants safe neighborhoods. That's not Democrat, Republican, white, black. But I think how we go about it, and the last thing I would say is that, yeah, for there are a lot of people who get on social media and they talk about and complain about it. I know people are busy, people have families, they have time, but at least do something. Try to be a mentor, try to give back in certain ways. Try to help support programs. I mean, different things that are going to help empower and uplift our young people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so much of it, I think, and you can feel free to correct me on any of this, because, like I said, I think you have a much better perspective because of your history in Montgomery and the things that you've done, especially working in the school system. But so much of it, I think, goes back to the fact that we have provided so many kids with an unequal education. Really, in a lot of cases, I would call some of it substandard education. And I think, and I don't think that's true for just Montgomery. I think that is true in a lot of areas around the state where you see some of these same problems. And I wonder, having been in the school system in Montgomery, having been at Lee, and I was around at that time too, and reporting on some things, but having been in there, walked through the halls every day, do you feel like that the kids are getting an opportunity to succeed, or is there an opportunity there, or is there something else that needs to be done?
Yeah, well, let me preface it with this: our teachers and education employees
Of
are
course.
doing a very great job. They're working hard. I think we should be paying them more. I think we should have better retiree benefits. I mean, I can't tell you how many retirees I meet that are having a really hard time these days. So
Hmm.
they're trying really hard. But what often see is missing is that, like, we can, for example, bring young people on college tours. But if there's not then access to, say, ACT prep, or there's not access to helping, the
Hmm.
way private school students will have an individual tutor that's going to help them write a great essay to then, get really good scholarships. So there are lots of good things happening in our public schools, but there's still a gap, or missing links to really transcend or cross that bridge from having just a decent education to then really making sure that those opportunities are accessible for young people. Look, a big issue that comes up, and this is not necessarily for the schools to fix, but a lot of young people who want to work, want to have a job, but they can't afford a car. And so a lot of it is also economic. And then what we, as far as a city and state, without having great public transportation, and then people have to rely on owning a vehicle or getting a ride. So it's within the schools, certain
Right.
things we do better, but a lot of it is then what we provide outside, is the saying of teaching to the whole child and wraparound services. There's more
Yeah.
of a need for that.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. It's honestly, that's why I ask you these questions, is because I did not necessarily think about some of those wraparound services like you're talking about, and how much those can be impactful on a kid and what they do, and through life. And look, all of that, as you've just heard, is why you're going to make a great lieutenant governor. You would be good serving anywhere, and have been great serving in the legislature, and so listen, man, I appreciate you you for what you're doing and what you have done. And I know you have made a difference in a lot of kids' lives around Montgomery because I've heard from them. And so I really do appreciate that. And hopefully, we can get you elected. And get you up there and doing some good stuff. So, but we appreciate you stopping by and spending some time with us.
No, thank you guys. It's always good to chat. And I'm going to get back out there and keep working, keep traveling the state. Look, I'm excited, and I hate what is happening in our country and in our politics, but it certainly is an opportunity right now for us to win. So I appreciate you guys, and thank you for focusing on the issues that matter so much to people.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That is Philip Ensler, the next Lieutenant Governor of the state. Really do appreciate you, Philip. All right, we're going to slide out. We'll come back in just a minute. It's Alabama Politics This Week. We're back in a moment.